What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bleav In Mavs with Mo Murphy. As always, I am your host, Mo Murphy, and I got a special guest in the building today. I have Miss Lauren Gunn. To every Mavericks fan, she's a familiar voice. So I'm glad she was able to join the show leading up to the NBA Finals. Game 1 will be happening Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern is tip-off. Lauren, how are you doing today?
God, I'm good. The Mavs are in the finals. I love the high energy that you have because that is how I feel about this team being in the finals. It's been a crazy year. So I'm super excited that they're here, that we get to talk about it. And there's certainly lots to say. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and that's something I did want to ask you about. So, Dallas is in the NBA Finals. What was your thoughts after Game 5? Like, and not necessarily like breaking down the game or what happened in Game 5 and Luka happened. Like, everybody's talked about that. But just from being a Mavs fan, like diehard, haven't seen, you saw a championship in 2011, been twice in the past 20 years in 06 and lost, and then one in 2011. So Dallas Mavericks reached the NBA Finals, and like, what was the feeling like for you? What were your initial thoughts? Did you have like some burning sensation to just like scream and celebrate in the finals?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Like everyone, I feel like to be honest, and I actually kind of came to this realization maybe earlier today or yesterday when I've been having conversations just about the Mavs being in the finals, and I feel like I felt through this run, but I feel like it really kind of came to a head in that Game 5 win against Minnesota, where it was like, I just feel confident about this team. Like there's something about watching them, and even in the close games, even in when it comes down to, whatever moment, I just trust them to get over the finish line. And it just feels like they trust themselves. And so it's been crazy. And obviously what lies ahead will be the ultimate test. But so far, as much as fun as it has been celebrating every single win, every single round, especially every single road win, being, the underdog team playing on the road, it's just been crazy. But the entire time, it was just like they're continuing to build momentum. So every single win feels like it's just the beginning. And as crazy and as cheesy as that is to say, I feel like it's so true. So I'm excited to watch them. I feel like this group just gets stronger and stronger. And even the level of play that we're seeing from some of them, even though there's been some inconsistencies with some players, I feel like as a unit, they're getting stronger. And that's a big deal.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And like to see them in the NBA Finals is like, if you would have said the Dallas Mavericks would be playing in the NBA Finals this year, if you would have said this a year ago, everybody would laugh. Everybody, even with Luka on the roster, like people would probably tell you Luka would be more likely not to be a Dallas Maverick this year and be on somebody else's roster than playing in the NBA Finals heading into this season. And then even coming into the playoffs, like their road to have to get there, it almost seemed impossible. You were going to have to beat probably the 3 best teams in the Western Conference is what it looked like, because you expected, I think most expected Denver to beat Minnesota. So you would have had to play 3 of the top 4 seeds. That's what your road looked like. And they were able to get it done. After they lost Game 4 while being up 3-0 against Minnesota. Was there ever a cause concern for you that they were going to blow this 3-0 lead and lose this series? Because it was a hot topic. And I know it was a hot topic even last year, and you saw it almost happen. The Boston Celtics were down 3-0, took it all the way to Game 7 against the Miami Heat. So I guess that's what would make the conversation louder, or anybody else that thinks it's possible, the Anthony Edwards believers, that this could be his Jordan moment.
Right.
Was there ever a concern after Game 4, though, that you thought Dallas wasn't going to end up in the NBA Finals?
I don't know that I would say there was concern that they would blow a 3-0 lead, but there was definitely a level of concern, especially when, like you mentioned, Anthony Edwards and just the overall ascension that he's had this year. He's probably been one of, if not the top stories in the NBA this year. And so I think when you're going up against a team like Minnesota that has so many weapons, and is so strong defensively, even though the Mavs were able to go up 3-0, it's the type of thing where it's like you really cannot afford to be playing with your food in any way. And even when the Mavs lost that Game 4, I didn't feel like they were playing with their food. I felt like, they need to handle their business. They know they need to handle their business. And Minnesota losing 4 straight, I mean, it was already surprising how the series ended up, but for Minnesota to get swept, I think everybody's jaws would have just been on the floor. So for me, the concern was more about, all right, close it out in game 5. Do not let it keep going back and forth to the point where you give them an opportunity to do it on their own home floor. Because I mean, that would have been obviously the ultimate level of concern. But I think at that point in game 5, as crazy as it is to say, I think everyone was so concerned about the potential to have a week off and for Derek Lively, and just even more so for Maxi Kleber, and just having every single day counting. I think people, well, I don't want to speak for other people, but I know I was certainly concerned about don't mess around and, lose that time off. I was more concerned about that than them blowing the series, and not because I didn't want to give Minnesota credit or because I didn't have faith in the Mavs, but it was the opposite. It was that I had so much confidence in the level that the team was playing at, that even on their off nights, I was like, I don't doubt that they're going to be able to take this team down. I've seen enough. At this point, I've seen enough.
Yeah, and I think the concern was the fact Lively had got hurt again.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
Lucas played in every game with blood on his knee coming through his compression pants
right.
every game. Mm-hmm. So I think with the OKC series, should have probably beat them in 5. We felt like they needed that couple extra days rest. We feel like Luka needed some rest. They didn't do it. So it seems like Dallas tried. It seemed like they almost wanted to tease the fans that they were about to take the hardest road possible and not take any opportunity given to them to be able to extend or close out series early and get more rest. So I think I could see that being a concern, even we don't want to have to go back to game 6. And they closed out business and Luka did what he did. And now they're in the NBA finals.
Right.
They're playing the Boston Celtics. I think so many people want to make this about Kyrie's return to Boston.
Right.
And it seems like Kyrie wants to make this about everything except his return for Boston. Look at what my teammates have done. Look at what a great coaching job. Look at this superstar and Luka Doncic. It's almost like he defers that question because I think he's in a great spot mentally where he doesn't even want to discuss it anymore. This past, I'm so far removed from that. I've made a stop in Brooklyn. I'm happy here in Dallas, and we're competing for a championship. That was 5-6 years ago that we're hanging on to with him in Boston. Do you think Kyrie's really do you think it's genuine how he is about I'm really just not concerned about being in Boston? They're in our way of getting to a championship. And so that's all it is for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think two things can be true. I absolutely believe that it's genuine when he says that. I also at the same time believe that the things that will probably get said to him in Boston will give him a level of fuel that he has not yet experienced in this playoffs, because I just think that is the level of hostility that an environment like Boston can present. And so I think Kyrie, having as much experience as he's had in this league, playing at this level, the championship opportunities, but then also the ones that he's been able to, the time that he's able to get over the finish line. I think for Kyrie, he has been able to move on. And I think everyone watching the Mavs this season, watching them come together as a group, watching Kyrie be the vocal leader, the one, in those huddles, in those moments where they need to come back from a double-digit lead or they need to overcome some sort of adversity. Kyrie being at the center of that, I think is the sample size and the proof that everyone has needed to make sure that this team is all united in their goal and everyone's on the same page and everyone knows their role no matter what that is. And I think Kyrie, and actually I think Coach Kidd also gets a lot of credit there with how he's been able to bring this group together. But I think Kyrie as the vocal leader and just everything that he's been saying all year is proof to me that he has moved on. His head is in the right place. He's the teammate that Luka needs because, and I want to draw attention to this. I'm sure obviously you're aware, but I think one thing that gets overlooked in the Kyrie Luka combo is everyone talks about how great of a basketball fit that they are. And that's true. They're both so skilled, whatever. But as far as the off the court, combo, that their personalities, we know Luka doesn't like to talk unless he's talking to the other crowd when he's trying to shut them up. He doesn't really like to talk. Not that Kyrie loves to talk, but if you get Kyrie talking, he's got a lot to say. And so I think that aspect of their relationship is huge because we've seen so many duos, trios not work out for all sorts of reasons. I think what makes Kyrie and Luka so special is that they complement each other so well in that way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think maybe if this duo links 5 years ago. And maybe if Kyrie's already a Dallas Maverick 6 years ago when Luka gets drafted to the Dallas Mavericks, like maybe it doesn't work out. But I think where Luka is in his career and where Kyrie is in his career and where he's at mentally, I think Kyrie was now ready to play and be that older brother to that up-and-coming superstar, which is Luka Doncic for the Dallas Mavericks. And I think he probably could have played this role to any one of the superstars, but I think what's special with Luka, I think Luka needed that as well. Like as much as Kyrie needed, I don't want to say needed because Kyrie's one of the most talented basketball players we ever saw, but at this point in his career, he may have needed a guy that can get you there in Luka Doncic, but like Luka needed him too. And I think that's going to, I think when Luka's 29 and 30, the impact of him being with Kyrie at 25, 26, 27, and however long Kyrie remains in Dallas and they keep this group together, I think when you start to see towards the end of Luka's prime and when he maybe has multiple championships up to that point, I think you'll see that the time that when him and Kyrie got together when he was 24, 25 years old had an impact for later on down when he's 31, 32 years old and may even have to play a mentor like Kyrie did. And he might be at that point where the next coming superstar that he's going to pass the torch to is on the Dallas Mavericks. And he has to, you know, play that big brother role. But he was shown how to be able to do that with Kyrie Irving, an intelligent guy. And if you get him to talking, like you said, he has a lot to say. So I think the friendship, the relationship off the court, people aren't necessarily valuing, but everybody in Dallas sees it. And everybody who's a Mavericks fan sees it. And they see the relationship between the players.
Oh, yeah.
This is like a family. And so it's like they love each other. They have a spark in each other's eye when they're talking about each other. You know, Gafford and PJ Washington kind of went from two of the worst, from the two worst teams in the league to playing for a championship. And they seem very like appreciative of the opportunity. Like,
100%.
Man, this trade might have saved my career, or at least now you value me different. And like Gafford was a good player playing in Washington, but nobody watched the Washington Wizards, so nobody knew that. So they didn't know what player they were getting when Gafford came. Same with PJ Washington. Like PJ Washington was more so known to everybody with his off-court stuff than he was on the court because he was playing for Charlotte. And it seems like that's the theme for a lot of Charlotte Hornets players is what happens off the court is more important than what happens on the court. But then you got to see these guys and what it looks like playing winning basketball. And it was shaky at first. I mean, they came out of All-Star break, 1-5. So it looked like they didn't get the right pieces. But then once everything started coming into fruition, heading into the playoffs, you saw it and these guys love it. How much do you love the fact that even if this team was to lose the finals, like, you know, this is a team that wants to keep this group together, head into the offseason, work hard and find themselves back in this spot. So that has to be refreshing as Mavs fans to see like, this looks like the nucleus and group of guys that want to be together and try and win multiple championships.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think that that's probably the biggest piece of all of it. Like, obviously, yes, enjoy the moment, enjoy being in the finals. So many things have to go right for you to even get here. But this team, on top of, like you mentioned, you got Kyrie and Luka, you've got the front court duo with Lively and Gafford, but also with PJ and Derek Jones Jr., which we'll see how that pans out. But I have some confidence there that that'll work itself out nicely. But I think the nucleus, even guys like Jaden Hardy and Omax, who we haven't seen much of Omax yet, but like we all know that that's coming and have reason to believe so, even just from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, the glimpses that we saw from him. So it feels like there's a real nucleus in place, like you mentioned, and that there's no need for any sort of significant upgrade or overhaul in any way. And that is a big deal, because when you can sort of just refine certain areas or just watch Derek Lively and his natural development, same with Jaden Hardy, watch the game slow down for Hardy, watch Lively potentially become a floor spacer. That's something that I'm like salivating at the mouth at the idea of that. And I just think that where this team is at right now, they already fit so well together from a schematic standpoint and even just a stylistic standpoint that I truly believe that even in the offseason, you know, whether it be an undrafted guy or a guy on a minimum, I think they've put themselves in a position where they have a culture, they have an identity where they're effective on both ends of the floor. They have a coach that is proving himself and a coaching staff that is also proving themselves right there with Jason Kidd and is getting the respect around the league. So I think they're finding themselves in a position where at the trade deadline, in free agency, guys might just say, hey, my career, like you mentioned with PJ and Gafford, obviously their contracts are different than guys that would be on the free agent market that Dallas could bring in. But I think the logic applies of someone being like, hey, my career where I'm at right now, maybe I want to compete, or maybe I need a place to revive my career in some sort of way. I think Dallas could be a great place for that. And if you're a guy that can shoot the three ball, there's a place on this team for you. So no matter what position you play. So I think Dallas is setting themselves up very well to not just be competitive right now, or not just get lucky right now. And I think everyone sees that. And so I think Dereck Lively is the key to all of that. If he doesn't turn into Dereck Lively the way we've seen him turn into all of that, there are still questions about, is the front court elite enough to guard a Jokic, to guard, an Embiid if you meet him in the final or something like that, whereas now I think we're seeing, oh yeah, no, they're good enough for that. And so I think all of those things put the Mavericks in a position to continue to naturally get better without having to give up a bunch of assets to do so. Their financial picture is also really solid moving forward. So like I said, I think they've got moves to continue to make, to continue to improve, but the pieces, the top tier, the front court, the duo, like everything is in place. And so it's going to be really interesting, because as much as I say that, like there are still pieces on the roster that are like, is that going to be the same after the offseason? I don't know. I would bet that by the end of the trade deadline, it's probably not. And so as much as like there are those glaring pieces, at the same time, there is a nucleus there. There is a formula there that's working. So we'll have to see how it shakes out. But yeah, you can't help but feel confident and feel good about the long-term picture of this team.
Yeah, and I think Dallas is in perfect position because, like you said, like it might be minor upgrades, but you also make minor upgrades while your superstar is getting better and better. Like this, Luka's only 25 years old. Like right. He's not even in the prime of his career yet. Like he's entering the prime of his career. We're about to see the best years of Luka, which is kind of crazy because 5 first-team All-NBAs later, we're talking about we don't even feel like we've seen the best of Luka. And so I think it's going to take the best of Luka to beat the Boston Celtics. Now, you said a lot about Dereck Lively.
Yeah.
Now, the bigs was like a main focus to get out of the Western Conference. It seemed like you needed a rotation of bigs because you knew you were going to have to play like Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon in Denver, or you were going to have Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Naz Reid in Minnesota. Yep. This is going to be a different matchup, though, because I think they're going to try and take the effectiveness of Dereck Lively and Daniel Gafford and Kleber. I think they're going to try and take their effectiveness on the defensive floor out by playing a 5-out offense and making really these big guys have to be lateral defenders. Right. They're going to have to be side-to-side defenders as opposed to protecting the rim. Are you concerned that this could be a series where, like, as much as everybody's fell in love with Lively, he's only a rookie. He hasn't hit his ceiling yet, so there's a lot more improvement. But are you a little afraid that this could be the series where some of his flaws and where he needs to improve to be where we think he should be at 23, 24 kind of get exposed in this series? Because I think this would be the series to be set up to kind of point out some of those flaws in the bigs in like Daniel Gafford and Lively and their true effectiveness on the defensive side of the ball when it's not rim protection, having Luka or Kyrie's back or Derrick Jones Jr. back if they get beat. I think they're going to have to play some one-on-one defense on the outside. Right. I'm a little concerned, but are you?
I agree that this would be the series that really puts that to the test. That being said, I'm not worried about it. Like, sure, it is going to be a test. And I think Daniel Gafford will struggle. I do. But I think Dereck Lively will not. I think I've seen enough from him to be able to move his feet if he's assuming he's picking up Horford or Porzingis. I also have questions about Porzingis being fully healthy, but you got to just assume that he's going to be. I think Dereck Lively could potentially end up playing a lot more minutes in this series, and maybe that's where that week of rest really kind of comes through. But I trust him to be able to move his feet and also to be able to recover and go get the chase down block more than I trust Gafford, just because of Lively's ability to move his feet and the stronger, or the longer wingspan. And so to me, I think Lively is better at that, but I do think that Tatum, Brown, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Drew Holiday, I think those guys are going to look at, like you said, this using the space to open things up to get to the rim. Because even if they just on a simple drive and kick, like from a conceptual level, yeah, Derek Lively might be able to move his feet, but if someone gets beat, if Jason Tatum starts attacking, sorry, hold on, Jesus, hold on, this freaking cat driving me nuts. So sorry about that. If Jason Tatum starts attacking Kyrie and then he gets beat, then our big, say Derek Lively's got to come in a little bit, and then you're leaving Horford in the, so there are absolutely some questions there, but this series is going to be a lot about 3-point shot making and efficiency. So that's something that I'm going to keep an eye on. But as far as playing in space, I trust Derek Lively to be able to do that. And then not to mention one of Dallas's best lineups this year. Obviously things changed when the front court started doing what they were doing, but one of the best closing lineups that Dallas threw out there was Luka, Kyrie, Derek Jones Jr., PJ, and Maxey. And I think that this series, we could potentially see that group get some minutes again. I don't know that they're not necessarily going to be closing games, but if you've got bigs getting in foul trouble or they're just not fast enough on that rotation, I think that there's a chance that we could see a little bit of that lineup just to throw a different look at Boston without having to necessarily go to a zone or something like that. I think going to a zone, I don't know that I like that on Boston. I hope I'm wrong because I do think we'll see a zone at some point. But I think going to the smaller lineup is something that could bode well for Dallas, maybe more so than something like than going to a zone. I think Boston will probably throw a zone at Dallas at some point, and I think that will actually throw a wrench a bit in Dallas's plans, but I think they'll adjust for it. I think on the defensive end, Dallas needs to stick to their game plan, stick to what they know, trust Derek Lively, and trust that he won't get in foul trouble. And if he does, you got to go with Gafford down the stretch. And if that's not cutting it either, then maybe that's when you play a little smaller.
Yeah, in Dallas, they've done everything right defensively from a team defense standpoint. And I talked about this earlier in the week where I'm like, when you think about defenders in Dallas, individually, maybe Derek Jones Jr., and I think now Lively, obviously, but 3 months ago, none of them would have rang bells as individual defenders, but this has been one of the better defensive teams in these playoffs. My thing is, I think team defense gets taken out of this for Dallas because of the 5 out and because of – so what about Luka and Kyrie? Because statistically, they've actually been 2 of the best defenders in the playoffs. If I'm not mistaken, they've been the 2 best. But I could be slightly wrong on the numbers there. But they've been 2 of the better defenders in these playoffs. But I think now there isn't going to be that time where you get beat by Jason Tatum. Lively might not be right there to step up and force Jason Tatum to shoot a mid-range shot. He might get taken out of the picture, and now Jason Tatum could drive to the hole. So how concerned are we from even a foul trouble standpoint for Luka and Kyrie Irving? Because you might be one-on-one on an island with a Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, and with them being bigger bodies and long, Jason Tatum 6'8", 6'9", Jaylen Brown 6'6", 6'7", a bigger body. They could also get those 2 in foul trouble, and obviously I think either one of them go down early based on foul trouble. I think we're kind of screwed that game as far as the match go. But are you really concerned about Luka or Kyrie defensively? Because they're smart enough. I think they can stay out of foul trouble for the most part.
Yeah, I think that's the key right there. I think they're both, I think the first part of it is that they're both smart enough to not get in foul trouble. And if they do come up with even just 2 dumb fouls on something like that, that would be enough to wake them both up and cut that out. But on top of that, I think seeing Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington, this is what I'm assuming, getting the matchup on Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. In my opinion, if Boston is going out of their way to try and target Luka and Kyrie so much just to get a one-on-one mismatch, I personally believe that is not going to result in effective and efficient basketball. I think they've got to stick to their game plan and know what they do well. And if they get the switch, I think we'll see the switch and see some targeting on Kyrie and Luka from time to time. But overall, I don't worry about Kyrie and Luka necessarily getting hunted the entire game. On the flip side of that, I think Jaylen Brown getting the Luka matchup is where they could run into a problem, because what you just mentioned about foul trouble is exactly what Boston needs to be worrying about. Because, as much as we like to talk about Shea hunting fouls, Luka does the same thing, in my opinion, and it's just part of the league. And so, if you're Boston, that presents a big challenge because, do you help? Do you switch the defense? And I think we'll see them switch the defense, and that can help guys stay out of foul trouble. But I do wonder, is Jason Tatum, the body type of him versus Jaylen Brown? You mentioned it. Does that, if they switch, is that something that is as effective? And even if it is effective, you're still picking up the best player remaining in the playoffs. And that is exhausting. And there's a price to be paid for exerting that much energy defensively, whether you're fouling or not. And so I think for Boston, they potentially are the ones that could be in trouble there if they have to spend significant amount of time putting their stars, like their top two guys, on Luka and or Kyrie, to the point where they're either risking being in foul trouble or risking, and I should say, and or risking running out of energy. I think in a long series that could potentially, be a struggle for them. And if they want to go to Drew Holiday, I don't think Drew Holiday is big enough. So I think that presents much more of a challenge for Boston than it does for Dallas.
Yeah, and I know everybody wants to point out like the Celtics defense. They're the best corner defense. Like they defend the corner three
right.
anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where like PJ Washington, Maxey, Derek Jones Jr. Like I think that's where those guys are going to be effective, because if they can hit those shots, now you take Boston's strong suit defensively and make it their weak point, and they have to adjust. I don't know what it's going to look like. We haven't seen anybody shoot Boston out of their defense yet. Right. Indiana came close, but the talent gap between Indiana and Boston was so big that late in the fourth quarter, it didn't matter how you exposed Boston's defense. They were able to get the win and sweep Indiana. That's not going to be the case for Dallas. Like if Dallas makes you adjust defensively, and now your strong suit is taking away that corner three, but PJ's hitting in game one, and you have to adjust at halftime, that might open up for Luka to score 25 in the second half. That might open up for Kyrie Irving to have 20 points, 5 assists, and 3 rebounds all in the second half. So Dallas just need to stick to their game plan and what's working offensively and make Boston adjust off of them, which I think is easier said than done. But just with Luka and Kyrie, I don't see Dallas needing to do anything different offensively than what's gotten them there, except you just kind of hope and pray that PJ Washington can kind of catch fire and have a stretch from the three-point line, him and Derek Jones Jr., like they had in game 4, 5, and 6 in that OKC series. Is that a far-fetched thought to just think Dallas just needs to come in here and play their game offensively, make Boston adjust, and if you're hitting shots, you're going to open up this series, and it's going to be a 3-point shootout against Boston, possibly anyway?
Right. I mean, I think that is it. I think that sums it up truly, is that Dallas needs to stick to their game plan, because everyone talks about Boston being so obviously versatile defensively. That is what everyone says, and how good they are at switching defensively. And that's true. But what is the defense that Luka thrives against? Switches. And if they bring that high pick and roll all the way out with Lively and Gafford, I'm sorry, but Porzingis and Horford, that is not going to work for them. I do not think that in a long series that how they choose to guard that pick and roll, especially a double pick and roll with Horford and Porzingis being a part of like the scheme coming out of it, whether it's the short roll with Lively, which has been the most effective, or even the short roll with Gafford, whether it's a double screen or even just a high pick and roll with just the big. I think that presents a real challenge for Boston, because Dallas can either target the big man, they can establish the lob, or they'll have the open three. So I do think that is where it's going to come in, where the shooters are going to have to rise to the occasion and hit those shots. And unfortunately, that's a lot of pressure, and you've got to hope, especially after a bit of a struggle in that last series for PJ. But Derek Jones Jr. had some big moments. Jaden Hardy still shooting well. Josh Green had some good moments, and Maxey kind of started to get back into it a little bit towards the end of that Minnesota series. So I think that there's enough different guys that Dallas can rely on to hit those open shots in order to stick to their game plan and not have to just completely be flailing, wondering what to do if PJ isn't hitting them. I think that they can get it from other guys. And I one thing that I'm going to keep an eye on is the points in the paint battle. I think that there's a very real world in which Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford are just annihilating Porzingis and Horford in the paint. I think that that's something that they're going to have to be, on for. And so Oh my God. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Jesus, what was the last thing you heard?
I think the last thing I heard, what the points in the paint battle.
All right. Sorry about that. The points in the paint battle, I think, is something that could favor Dallas a lot here. I think there's a very real world in which Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford are just on the offensive glass and just hanging around above the rim could be something that's so much more impactful, more so than Horford and KP. I think those two, how they stretch the floor, how they impact Boston's scheme is going to bode really well for Boston, and that's going to be huge on the offensive end, especially just in order for Boston to have the level of success that they're planning on having. But I think as far as the defensive end goes, I think a lot of people at the national media level are skipping that part of it. They're so focused on Boston's perimeter defense and how good they are, they're completely missing what I think could end up being a very favorable points in the paint battle for Dallas.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just because, like, if Luka was a center, then everybody will be talking about like how Dallas could take advantage of points in the paint. But because, national media, if the name doesn't ring bells, and they don't do enough
exactly
either, like, I don't think they're familiar enough with the impact of Lively
right.
and the impact of PJ Washington and Gafford. It's a cool story to brush by for them and say, yeah, they went from worst to first, and it's a cool story. But I don't think they really understand any of these guys' impact. I don't think they've watched it enough. And because they haven't broken it down enough, they haven't explained to me. People are just like, man, I'm going to take Dallas in 6 because they got that man Luka. And like, that's the easy explanation. But when it comes time to like validate why you think they're going to win, I mean, it's going to take more than just, it's more than just, oh yeah, Luka and Kyrie. I like Luka and Kyrie over Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but that's the easy national media thing to do. So we say all that to say, first off, I appreciate your time, but we're going to close out the show. You got to give us a prediction.
Yeah.
Now, I've been consistent. Okay. I've been taking the Mavs in 6. So full disclosure, anywhere I've been, I've said Mavs in 6, Mavs in 6. I'm a big believer when you don't have home court advantage, you need to win one of those first 2 games on the road. And then you need to close it out in 6. You don't want to play on the road in a game 7. I think this could be a 7-game series, but I think Dallas wins it, and they could win in Boston. But I think the safe thing for Dallas, if they want to get it done, is they're up 3-2 in Dallas in game 6. You don't let the Larry O'Brien trophy leave Dallas. So for me, I'm going to take the Mavs in 6. What about you?
Yeah, I like the Mavs in 6, and I have been saying lately Mavs in 7 because I don't want to overlook what Boston can do, and I trust the Mavs to win on the road. But the more I watch, the more I hear other people and read and just see everything going on with this series, the more I do feel like the Mavs can do it in 6, and it's likely to expect them to do it in 6. And another thing that I just want to point out is that Boston has struggled to close out games, and they've struggled at home. They've been solid, like they can win on the road, but they have struggled at home and they have struggled to close out games. And I absolutely think that the story of this series is either going to be Boston lived and died by the 3, or the Mavs, or if the Mavs win, the story will be the Mavs dominated that series. It didn't matter what Boston did. It was always Dallas's. They were in control. Even in the games that they lost or were down or whatever. And so I think as much as you can say, Dallas has such a big part of them is the 3-point identity, and they have in the past lived it by the 3 and died by the 3. That's not the case anymore. Dallas plays defense now. And not that Boston doesn't, not saying that, but the ISO scores down the stretch, the decision-making down the stretch by Boston is cause for concern. Whereas with Dallas, that's where they thrive. And I think that at the finals, this is the biggest stage for that. And if Boston, doesn't have every single screw tightened there, that could be to their detriment. So I think I'm gonna sway with you and say Mavs in 6. I do think that they get it done.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, like, people hear this and like, we're a little biased. Like,
sure,
but I don't expect any Boston outlet to pick Dallas to
right.
It's just going to be what it is. I don't care if people think it's a fair, assumption to say that they're going to win in 6. But yeah, I'm going to stick to, like I said, I'm going to stick to Dallas winning in 6. You don't want to play game 7 on the road. But Lauren, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you for jumping on Bleav In Mavs. Is there anything that you got coming up that you want to let the world know, or you just chilling and gonna enjoy this?
I mean, I'm definitely chilling and I'm gonna enjoy this series. But yeah, like I mentioned, I've been doing some work with Bleacher Report. So I will be going live in the Bleacher Report app, doing a post game coverage for every single game in the finals, however many games it goes. So the second that game is over, I'll be in the Bleacher Report app breaking it all down. And then once the season is over, I am going to be launching a little transaction cycle based project. So the summer will kick off, the draft will be coming up, free agency, all that good stuff. And then before we know it, the season will be back up and running, and then December will be coming, and the transaction cycle never stops. So I've got a project coming for that. Stay tuned if you're interested in the trade machine stuff, the CBA stuff, the second apron stuff, all that good stuff. So that will be coming up, and stay tuned.
Yeah. So once again, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate everybody for listening. If you're listening to this before game one, Mavericks got to get it done. I think the Mavericks are going to win game one. I can't wait to watch tip off 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Central. As always, be well, be safe, and we will talk to you after game one on another episode of Bleav In Mavs.